the NRA cancels its annual meeting, Biden bans Russian bullets, and an interview with AAPIGO members. That and more on this episode of the Weekly Reload Podcast.
I made the devil run. I gave him poison just for fun.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another episode of the Weekly Reload Podcast. I am your host, Stephen Gutowski. I'm also the founder of thereload.com. If you want to get this podcast a day early, you can head on over to thereload.com and buy a membership. Grab up a membership for yourself. You'll get this 24 hours before everyone else, and you'll get access to a bunch of exclusive content, including a lot of my special analysis. And you will also get a extra weekly newsletter featuring my analysis that goes out every Sunday, in addition to our, of course, free newsletter that anyone can sign up for without paying a dime over at thereload.com, which goes out every Friday morning to give you the latest updates on the gun news in America. Speaking of which, we will do that here now on the podcast. Big news this week is that the NRA canceled its annual meeting. The meeting was set to go off just a week after it got canceled. So last minute cancellation there. Big deal for the organization because traditionally the annual meeting is their largest fundraising event of the year, where they typically have upwards of 80,000 NRA members descend onto a city to explore the exhibits of major gun companies, go to country and rock music concerts, watch speeches from politicians that support the NRA, including in recent years the President of the United States, but also many senators and governors as well, and also give their feedback to NRA leadership in person, which we saw become fairly spectacular the last NRA annual meeting back in 2019, where people were upset about the allegations of misappropriation of funds by NRA executives for their own personal use, including CEO Wayne LaPierre and others at the top levels of the NRA. But this year, none of that will be happening because of the rising number of COVID cases in Texas, where the event was planned to be held in Houston, and reportedly a number of gun companies had dropped out of attending the event over concerns for their staff and the safety of their staff, especially given the lack of hospital beds available in Texas and staff to man those beds. The state has had to call in medical professionals from other areas of the country to try and help deal with the surge in COVID cases they've seen there recently, as of other states and other parts of the country. But apparently that was enough of a risk that these companies did not want to attend this indoor meeting. Benelli confirmed to me after a report from the Daily Beast that it would not be attending the event due to the risk of COVID. There has also been speculation that the aforementioned controversy surrounding CEO Wayne LaPierre and the ongoing legal battle with the state of New York, where the Attorney General is seeking to dissolve the organization, to shut it down, that also played a role in some of the decision making by these major gun companies to leave. I think that perhaps there was a lower bar due to that unfolding situation for some of these companies to say no to the NRA, and eventually enough of them pulled out of the event that didn't really make sense anymore for the NRA to hold it. And of course, they said in a public statement that they wanted to avoid the risk of having a COVID outbreak among staff of the NRA and of any of the exhibitors. So that event has been canceled. I actually wrote a piece in addition to our news report on what this means for the NRA going forward. It's a members only piece. So again, if you buy a membership, if you go get yourself a membership, you will have access to that piece where I talk a little bit about why this matters so much financially for the organization and why that lower bar for gun companies to buck whatever the NRA wants them to do matters as well. So you should head over and check that out. We had other big news this week coming out of the Biden administration where they imposed new sanctions on the Russian government in the form of an ammo ban. That's right. There will no longer be approvals for new permits to import Russian ammunition. Now, this does not have necessarily an immediate effect of cutting off all supply of Russian ammunition today, because ongoing permits or permits that have already been approved will continue to operate, but those permits generally only extend up to 2 years, and any new permits or current applications will not be granted, which means that over the next 2 years or so, all supply of Russian ammunition into the United States will be completely choked off. The administration claims that they did this to respond to the poisoning attack of one of Putin's political opponents that occurred about a year ago, and that these sanctions are part of the response to that event, as well as his jailing once he returned to Russia after he survived the poisoning attempt. And the Biden administration says that this ammo ban, importation ban, which also would extend to all Russian-made firearms, though most of those were already banned for importation due to similar sanctions against Russia. And the administration says that that is what the focus of these sanctions is, to try and hurt the Russian government. However, this will also certainly have a major impact on supply of ammunition in the United States, where there's already an ongoing shortage that has affected every caliber of ammunition. But obviously this ban will affect calibers typically associated with Russian-made firearms, like, AK-47s or AK-74s or Makarovs and a lot of other firearms, which are really quite popular in the United States. But also these Russian manufacturers do make a lot of common NATO rounds, or rounds that are more popular in American-made firearms like 9mm or 223 or 5.56. So that supply will also dwindle, and it's likely that while the ban, again, won't completely shut off importations for a year or two, in the meantime, there will probably be a run on Russian-made ammunition, which is very popular in the United States and has been distributed at most every gun store in the country. Even Walmart sells Russian-made ammunition in the form of Tula ammo or Tula ammo. Forgive my pronunciation there. But again, I've discussed why this will have an immediate impact in more depth over at the Reload in a member's piece. So you can see, as I keep pointing out here, that the membership is quite valuable. You get quite a lot for signing up today. And this is the only ad on this show, as you guys know by this point. So hopefully it's not too overbearing. But regardless, today we have an interview with members of the Asian American Pacific Islander Gun Organization, which features a number of really wonderful initiatives that they've undertaken recently. Some really interesting things going on. They're one of the first Asian American focused gun groups in the country, and we talk about what it's like, what it's been like for them over the last couple months that they've been in existence, and what their goals are, what their plans are, how they're going to carry them out. So I will send it over to myself here I filmed this in the past, so we're going back in time, I guess, technically. But listen and enjoy, please. All right, we are here with members from AAPIGO to talk a little bit about some of the activities that they've been engaged in recently. This is a relatively new Asian American Pacific Islander gun group based out in California. And I'm here today with a few a few of the members of leadership, and can you guys just introduce yourselves one by one? Maybe Scott, you start.
Yeah, absolutely. And I would say we're kind of more of the Caucasian Asian PIGO group today. We had a couple of folks that couldn't make it, but I am Scott. I'm the co-founder of the group, and really looking forward to chatting with everybody about all the exciting things we have going on.
And your name is Scott Kane, right? You're the
Exactly. Yep.
One of the co-founders, and you also host the podcast as well, right? You're one of the co-hosts.
Yeah, we jointly host the podcast there. So yeah, I'm kind of like the MC, and they're the rappers.
Mm-hmm. And Bobby, what about you? What's your role?
Yeah. I initially joined Scott to help out before the split, but then afterwards I kept on helping out with Scott, and I'm on the podcast as well. Help out with the events and stuff like that.
And you're Bobby Yang is your name.
Exactly.
Right?
Yep.
Yes. And so you've been there since the beginning of
the beginning. Yeah.
Of the group, and yeah, obviously there were other members that split off into a separate group. We're not going to get too much into that today. I just wanted to focus on what you guys have been doing, and maybe down the line I can have the other group on and talk about some of the stuff that they're doing. But we wanted to focus on what you guys are up to now, because you've had some interesting events. Raphael, what's your role at the group? What have you been working on them with?
So I also co-host the podcast. There are 4 of us who are regulars. I also do a bit of brand management and help shape our message.
Wonderful. And so you guys are all based in California, right?
No.
No.
Bobby and I are.
Yes,
but yeah, Raphael's on the
Democratic
East Coast.
People's
We have
Republic of New
Malcolm
York
as well, who's on the East Coast, and then
okay.
He who must not be named, who does not like to share his name on the air, who is also on the East Coast. But so actually, yeah, 3 out of 5 are East Coast, but primarily here. Yeah.
So you've expanded a bit from the very early days, obviously, and now you have more of a nationwide footprint, at least as far as the podcast goes, right, and the website.
Yeah, exactly. In fact, I mean, we just hosted a really exciting event here in California on July 31st, but we're already kind of in the midst of planning an East Coast event.
Oh, really? Well, before we get to that, why don't we talk a little bit about that event? This was a range day that you guys hosted with a number of Asian American gun owners. What was the goal of that event?
Well, I would say it was like more than just a simple range day. I mean, it sort of ended up morphing into kind of like Lollapalooza for guns and first-time gun owners. So we got a bunch of people, brought them out to the desert, shot a lot of steel targets under supervision of NRA-certified instructors, such as the great Brian Wang at Monarch Defense. And it just really turned into kind of like just a good event for first-time shooters in particular, where they're able to kind of try out a good variety of firearms, decide, which type was right for them. We had a few ladies trying AR-15s for the first time ever. It was great. And
That's awesome.
And the dog agrees.
Yes. And Bobby, were you at that event as well?
Yep. Yeah, I was at the event.
What was your takeaway from the event? What was the biggest thing that you saw going on there?
Yeah, I think for me, one of like the biggest things was just seeing the community out there. Being in tech, most of my friends are tech people, and most of them don't own guns or talk about them or have anything to do with them. So kind of just seeing like different people, like most of them were Asian that came out, but seeing like different people from the community coming out, and seeing that was the most interesting part for me.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it certainly sounds like you guys are taking sort of a a rainbow coalition approach to the way this group works. It's sort of focusing on trying to help Asian Americans and Pacific Islanders get into gun ownership, but not obviously limiting the membership or the people involved to, a particular ethnic group or race or whatever. It seems like much more of a concerted effort is that like how you view it?
Yeah, I mean, I would say so. I mean, if you think of other groups that are out there, they're more like the NRA, more old school, kind of an older demographic, and we're kind of more like FPC. So we're scrappy, younger, hungrier, and kind of really doing things without any support from the big gun establishment, so to speak. Not that we wouldn't welcome, some help here or there, some partnerships, but for the most part, we built this from the ground up and are handling everything ourselves, from the social media to event planning and everything like that. And it's really the community's our strength, because we couldn't do it without the folks out there that are listening to the podcast and participating in the events. They're really what makes this whole thing possible.
Certainly. And Raphael, what would you say your main motivations to get involved with the group were?
Yeah, so Scott actually reached out to me a while before anything solidified. I'd expressed some views online that he liked, and we were talking about gun ownership from a not necessarily traditional right-wing perspective. And a few months later, he reached out to me. We'd been talking about doing a podcast and was like, hey, it's on. You want to do this? And so I didn't know what I was getting into, went in, and I was like, oh, this is awesome. More minorities with guns. And been diehard ever since.
Certainly. Wonderful. And now one of the things that you guys have undertaken on the more political side of things is this drive to have Asian Americans apply for concealed carry licenses in California, where obviously the process is very restrictive, and you have to have a good reason, according to government officials there, in order to be issued a permit. And obviously in certain parts of California, in certain localities, they effectively don't issue permits to anyone. Can you talk a little bit more about that? I think Bobby, you you actually applied as part of this. Is that?
Yep.
Is that right?
Yeah.
Can you tell me a little bit more about why you guys decided to do that, and why you personally, got involved with that part of what the organization is doing?
Sure. Yeah. For me personally, I decided to submit my application because I feel like just the time that we're living in now, there's definitely some civil unrest, to say the least. And just looking at crime stats, not specifically where I live, but just around the Bay, whether if it's in the city or if it's in the East Bay, that the crime has been rising pretty drastically. So that was a pretty big motivating factor to apply for my concealed and carry permit, and that along with I think that it should I think that it should be given out more freely than it is now in the county I live in, specifically in Santa Clara. That was another reason for me applying as well, just because the county is very restrictive on who they give these permits out to, and I think personal protection is more than enough for good cause.
Yeah, and you mentioned rising crime. Obviously, there's been a increase in specifically hate crimes committed against Asian Americans, including in the Bay Area, in San Francisco. Is that part of the motivation here for this effort to have a number of Asian Americans apply for these kinds of permits, even though it's probably unlikely they'll be approved?
Yeah, for me, it definitely was. And I think, so Scott had an experience of this. I personally haven't, thankfully. But it's something that I'm definitely aware of. So even if it's not directed towards me, if I'm out and I'm with friends or just out and about, and I just want to be able to protect my community, both here locally, and also kind of the larger community of the Bay, and also to my Asian brothers and sisters as well, more specifically, since they are very underrepresented when it comes to politics in general, I feel like.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure. Certainly. And Scott, as Bobby alluded to there, your family has experienced this sort of hate motivated, actions in the past year and a half. And in fact, wasn't that one of the motivating factors for you to become a gun owner? Because you're relatively new to owning guns at this point, right? Can you talk a little bit about both of those things?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I mean, basically, it's kind of covered in one of the first articles on the Reload there, but to kind of recap that, my wife and I, she's Chinese, my daughter's 50% Chinese. We're just walking down the streets of San Jose one day, and this creepy group of dudes pulled out of a pickup truck and just, yelled a bunch of racial stuff like, F you, Kung Flu, go back to China. And that just felt like super, super disempowering to me. And, you're reading stories about people getting followed home into their garages in Oakland and assaulted as they're taking groceries out of their car, or, getting mugged in parking lots, or just, attacked for simply being Asian. So it really got me thinking, like, well, what if I wasn't there? Like, would they have been more aggressive and gone after my wife and kid, God forbid? So that's kind of like what got me interested in, purchasing my first firearm. And coincidentally, the day that I got my first firearm was the day that everything shut down due to shelter-in-place orders in Santa Clara County. So I ended up having to wait like around 40 or 45 to 50 days to actually get my first firearm due to, shops being shut down and all the restrictions within California. There's also, a lot of people don't realize this, but like a 30-day limit on the amount of handguns you can buy in the state. So because of that, I ended up having to pay the fees twice, do the exam twice, and all of that because, the store that I ended up purchasing from ended up going bankrupt. So that's really what kind of started, the planting the seed. But fast forward to about, a year later, April, when that horrific shooting in Atlanta happened. And, I just felt like that was clearly racially motivated. There was a lot of gaslighting going on. And so, predating AAPIGO, I actually started this CCW Bay Area group on Google, which was also on Reddit. And that's kind of like how I ended up meeting some of the original co-founders. They reached out to me and said, hey, really like what you're doing. Why don't we start collaborating on some stuff? And so that's kind of how the whole genesis of AAPIGO got started, was as a result of that original push for CCW applications within the Bay Area. And I would say, like, the point of that exercise, we did have about 80 people sign up and commit to apply for CCWs, but we're really clear up front that chances of success are pretty much minimal. The real point is to show political impact. And honestly, like, we had an application deadline of May 31st, and no one in the group that I've talked to has heard anything from the sheriff of Santa Clara County about that. It's expected, but also, I guess we have to have a pallet of iPads like Apple's security chief in order to, get through to them.
Right, because there's been a lot of corruption, specifically in that county when it comes to issuing gun-related permits, where there have been bribes and people have been prosecuted over it. In case anyone who doesn't understand the reference you're making there, but certainly the whole system, I guess, is what you're sort of pointing out the flaws in of this may issue style law, where it's up to essentially the discretion of your local sheriff as to whether or not you can get your permit, even if you otherwise pass all of the requirements, or have a specific concern, like a rise in hate crimes against Asian Americans.
Not only that, it's a perfect avenue for racism when you put a legal right in the hands of one person. That person essentially has unlimited potential for abuse of power.
Mm-hmm. And obviously we've seen that play out, not just in California, but also in New York, whose law is now, at the Supreme Court, which actually there'll be a hearing. The arguments on that start on November 3rd. So will be interesting to see how that plays out and how that might affect what you guys are trying to do in California. If may issue laws are found to be unconstitutional, you could see sort of the swift change in law on the front of concealed carry permits there. But Raphael, I was wondering if you could talk a little bit more about sort of the tech, I guess, angle of this, of what you guys are doing. It seems like there's a lot of people who are, work in tech or involved in tech pursuits, right? That's also another sort of common interest in this group, from what you guys have talked about thus far. Does that carry through for you as well?
Yeah, I'm also a software engineer. I think part of that is the number of us who live in the Bay Area, just in terms of our occupational demographics. But I think on another level, I think we're all drawn together by we're not your stereotypical gun owners. I was raised a redneck. I kind of hopped from lower middle class to upper middle class, and I'm living a different life than my parents did. A lot of us, come from different backgrounds, but we're all kind of your average yuppies. And I think that appealing to the kind of person who actually needs defense more than, say, your average redneck these days, is a really appealing message that I think, just from the event and my experience there, is a really good inroad for a lot of people. They can see that I'm not wearing a red hat. I'm not wearing a t-shirt with any offensive slogans on it, but I'm eager to teach people how to defend themselves. And that's, I think, something that a lot of people have never seen before, and it speaks really well.
Right, and that's another thing that I think perhaps sets AAPIGO apart from other gun groups that exist out there, is the way that you talk about gun ownership, and perhaps just your politics in general may be a bit different than...
We don't talk about politics. We talk about policy.
Right.
Politicians aren't our problem. The policies that they promote are. We don't mention politicians in connection with their policies. We try to keep party names out of it. Mm-hmm. This is about what policies are best for people. It does matter who you vote for, but we're not here to tell you who to vote for. We're here to tell you what these laws can mean for your life.
Sure, certainly, but I mean, I think it's just your approach is distinct from a number of other gun groups that tend to lean much more on the conservative side of the spectrum politically. Not to say that you guys don't won't work with or allow conservative-minded people into your group or anything like that, but it seems to be one of the things that is a differentiator, perhaps, for what you guys are doing. Do you feel that's accurate, or am I being too broad?
Well, I mean, I think it's we're kind of a mixed coalition. So, like, for example, I mean, I'm recorded as having voted for Biden, which, I may be recanting that over the last 72 hours, given what's going on in Afghanistan. Kind of I don't know if this is a family-friendly podcast, but a bleep show. So it's kind of hard not to reconsider some of those things. Plus, things like the Georgia runoffs, who expected that was going to flip the other side and, ending the filibuster. So, I mean, people grow, they kind of evolved, and these guys have taught me a lot, especially on, some of my views on, like universal background checks versus, criminal background checks. A lot of people don't realize there is a distinction. One of them requires a registry of gun owners, and, you don't want that falling into the wrong hands, whereas most people don't realize that when the anti-gun establishment says something like that, they're completely ignoring the fact that every state has their own background system through NICS, and criminal background checks are taking place on pretty much every sale. So that's been an eye-opener for me in particular, and, kind of owe it to these guys for sort of opening my horizons a little bit. Like I said, I'm sort of like, part of my role as the host on the podcast is, like, I'm there to listen and just kind of field questions, and most of the content is coming from these guys, and we're debating and having good, healthy discussions about it, and it's been, a fun ride so far.
Sure.
I think it's worth mentioning that we have different personal politics. I don't think you can apply one filter to all of us. I definitely have different politics than Scott and Bobby.
For sure.
But we try to stay to the core issue, which is the universal right to keep and bear arms, which that's the one thing we all definitely agree on.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. So how do you foresee the future of this group going? Like, what are your goals long term? What do you want to accomplish with AAPIGO? Obviously, in the short term, I imagine you're going to have more events and stuff. But I want to get the long term vision for where you guys want this group to end up. What do you want it to be, and what do you hope to accomplish with it?
Well, I mean, it's still kind of a work in progress, but I mean, like, at least my vision long term, and, everyone else has their own opinions on it and their thoughts and how we want it to go. But ideally, I'd love to see us as, like, the antithesis to Moms Demand Action or Newtown. They're very active politically and appealing to politicians, lobbying, that sort of thing. And I just don't really see many groups on the right doing that, save for lawsuits. Like Moms Demand Action has phone banks every week where they're calling up politicians and saying, hey, vote no on this gun legislation or vote yes on this anti-gun legislation. So finding a way to kind of like tap into that grassroots political potential and harnessing it for the greater good and the Second Amendment, that's ultimately where I'd like to see things go, and providing, good solid education for folks that join the group too.
And what about you guys, Raphael and Bobby? What do you think?
Our core tenets are education, outreach, and advocacy, and I think that's what we're going to continue to do. So we want to educate people. We want to reach out to people who don't know they want a gun yet, and we want to advocate for the Second Amendment and generally self-defense rights. We don't care if it's a gun or if it's a taser. Tasers are illegal where I live, and that's just as indefensible as an open carry ban or a concealed carry ban. So I think long term, we want to expand all three of those. We want to reach out to more people. We want to advocate more loudly, and that's bigger and better.
Sure. What about you, Bobby?
And that was Mrs. Kane, by the way, there. So she just dropped in to say hi.
Wonderful.
Yeah. For me, I think one of course, I agree with our core tenets, but I personally want to be able to just have more Asian Americans express their voice and their thoughts, because I was raised very traditionally Chinese, and I was taught to keep my head down and just do your work, do your job, and you'll like excel in life and you'll meet your goals, which I totally believe working hard will get you to where you want to be. But just with politics and the way that the country is going, I feel like there's going to be some pretty immediate action that's needed from like the Asian American community. I mean, I see it locally, not with gun rights, but with other things, more specifically in education, in the area I'm at, where Asian Americans are stepping up and like voicing their opinions and fighting back. So I personally would love to see that more. And for me, I hope that my role in this will help like other Asian Americans also see that, yes, they have a voice. Yes, they can voice their voice.
Yeah. I mean, there's certainly been a lot of reporting on this idea in media of Asian Americans sort of speaking up more in the political realm because of traditions that you just spoke about. That hasn't been as much of a at the forefront in that community until now. And it's interesting that you say that. So you view do you think that's something that this view that speaking out on gun rights is something that perhaps more Asian Americans will come to do now after the last year and a half?
Yeah, I'm hoping that it will happen, just because I believe the Second Amendment basically helps protect all of our other rights. So I think this is a very, very crucial right that we can't give up on, and we can't just be in the background of. I believe that we like really need to actively fight and make sure our right is not being infringed on. And I hope that lots of other Asian Americans can rally behind this and agree as well. Just because like the Second Amendment is probably one of the more or maybe even the most controversial right. So it's like maybe not the best place for someone who's just starting to voice their opinions about politics to start from. But I think that, and I hope that eventually we'll get to a point where more Asian Americans can kind of not view gun ownership as something like negative, because I feel like that's pretty big in the Asian community. But to see it for what it really is and why the founding fathers like actually put that as the Second Amendment versus just seeing like all guns equal more violence. Yeah.
Sure. Now, obviously, people out there, there's going to be people who say, why create a group specifically for Asian Americans or to appeal to Asian Americans? Why not work within other groups like the National Rifle Association or someone like that and go through their, whatever outreach programs they have? What do you guys think sets you apart as a group and makes your existence necessary, makes it like valuable for something like AAPIGO to be out there?
Yeah, well, I mean, obviously, I just saw a cameo of two of the reasons that are near and dear to me of why we need a group like this. I just don't want my wife and my daughter to feel like they're unsafe walking down the street or going doing an activity as simple as shopping. People in the Midwest might not realize it, given the fact that Asian populations are, lower, but in California, huge population, New York, East Coast, etc. And this is where the epicenter of like all the hate crimes are happening. Just follow at Dion Lim TV on Twitter. She's an ABC News reporter, and there's like a case after case after case of Asians just being attacked for absolutely no reason, particularly in large cities over here. So, I think the reason the group exists is because of that. Asians are the most targeted group. And, obviously I'm not Asian, but I've kind of got a vested interest, as you just saw, with my family. And I just want to do everything I can to, make sure that they don't have to grow up in a world where they're seeing crap like this on the news on a daily basis, let alone being in fear of experiencing it themselves. Right, it's like my in-laws don't even want to visit at this point. It's just really sad.
And you guys feel like the community was underserved before now? No.
Yeah, and I think like these like niche groups, whether it's us or Naga or like more like specific groups, I think they're very helpful, because I think this is like widely generalized, but like normally like people of a race kind of like bond with each other easier. Like just speaking personally, like whenever I like would start school, I would always like gravitate normally towards the other Asian kids in school. Same with at work now. So it's like gun ownership being already such a controversial topic, already such a stigmatized topic in the Asian community. I think it's hard for some people to like step out and be like, oh, I'm gonna go to this NRA meeting, or oh, I'm gonna go to this other meeting where like I'm the only Asian person there. I think these groups are definitely very useful, but I think that like once you like know what your opinions are on a certain topic, and once like you like know what you believe and you like firmly believe, I think there's definitely like areas where like we can integrate and help like just in a broader sense rather than a more specific sense towards the
So it's
Asian
kind of
American community.
there's kind of an advantage to a shared experience, I guess, is what you're getting at there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because like before, I didn't really understand either, because coming from tech, there was this huge like movement to get more like female engineers, and then there were like these like female specific meetups, and I would think, oh, why don't you just join like another meetup? And then and I didn't really understand until pretty recently, where I just kind of like looked over like what I did like throughout my career and kind of like my childhood and growing up, and it made a lot of sense for like people who are like share some type of commonality to be in a group, just so that they feel comfortable and that they're able to like just voice their opinions in a group that they feel comfortable sharing things with.
Right, that makes sense. And I imagine your group also has an advantage with like literally being able to speak the language of some Asian Americans who whose first language isn't English, right? I mean, has that come into play? Is that something that you're considering as part of your advantage as a group to help bring more Asian Americans into the gun owning community?
Yeah, I think for me, like Chinese was my first language. I haven't been speaking it as much since I moved out from my parents, so it's definitely a skill I need to keep on doing so I don't forget it, so I don't lose it. But I mean, I definitely think that that's something that we are like thinking about and that we'll use to our advantage, just because I go to the range pretty often in San Jose, and I would say most of the time like half the people there I see on the pistol range are speaking Chinese, so like there's a good amount of like Chinese speaking gun owners, especially new gun owners, so yeah, I think there's definitely room there.
No, that makes a lot of sense. So what are in the short term? We talked about the long term a little bit there. In the short term, what's next for AAPIGO? What events do you have coming up? What are some of the initiatives you're looking forward to, getting underway?
Yeah, I mean, I would say we're trying to plan like a bunch more micro events. I mean, this event was a huge scale, took like 2 months of planning, but we definitely want to get out there to more local ranges and just have informal meetups with folks in the community as well. We're working on one of those right now, so stay tuned.
Wonderful. And for people who want to get involved, people who want to join, they want to help out, whether they're Asian or white or Hispanic or black or whatever, what's the best way that they can do that? How can they actually attend one of your events or listen to your podcast or join the group? What's the best avenue?
Yeah, I'd say the best avenue for now is our website, which is at aapigo.net. And then our podcast is AAPIGO Cast. So basically to search for that
also
on all
linked
the
from the
major
website.
channels. And it's pretty much all of our social media links are on the website as well, right in the home page. So we're on Instagram, we're on Twitter, we're on Reddit. We have a really good Discord community, which we actually kind of use to do a live Q&A portion for our podcast every week. So if we can get more people to show up to that session, it'll be a lot more exciting audio than just four guys shooting the breeze with occasional guests. But yeah, I'd say that's those are the main channels. Raph, Bobby, anything to add there?
There are big things coming up on the podcast. I'd recommend keeping an eye on it. We've been talking to some very interesting people and getting more, formal guests. So we're looking forward to sharing more of that with you as it comes along.
Yeah, and I'd also add that collaborations with those guests are going to be kind of key for our growth going forward. So we're talking to various people who are kind of a similar mindset in the gun influencer community who maybe aren't the Coin Nors of the world or other folks you may have heard of, but still have pretty good social presence and kind of forming coalitions with them to drive some of the political change that we were discussing earlier is going to be kind of key to our growth strategy moving forward.
Yeah, and then for me, this could be more of like on a personal thing than like a AAPIGO thing. But I'm opening a gun shop in San Jose, so I'm excited to see kind of like how that can work out with the AAPIGO as well. But yeah, I signed the lease and put in my FFL application and have been talking with SJPD for a couple months now. I signed the lease recently, but I've been talking with the city people for a couple months.
Sure. Well, I imagine there aren't very many Asian American gun store owners at this point. Right?
There's not too many of them. There's a handful for sure. Just in general, the Bay Area doesn't have too many gun stores. I was out in Oakdale this past weekend, and there were like three or four gun stores in this like small town of Oakdale. So like the Bay Area doesn't have nearly enough, in my opinion.
Yeah, I mean, and that's kind of sad because when you think of some of the regulations that Sam Liccardo is trying to put in place at San Jose, that really just drives small mom and pop stores out of business. It doesn't affect Bass Pro Shops or Sportsman's Warehouse or Cabela's or Big Five, but the little guys, like potentially Bobby's business are the ones that suffer most from some of those restrictions.
Sure. How's that process gone so far, Bobby?
It's been not the easiest, just because around here in the Bay, like different cities have different zoning restrictions, and San Jose was one of the lesser restrictions in terms of zoning. Where I'm at on the peninsula, lots of the cities here require like a special permit that needs to go through a council, and like you'll never get through the council. And then like Belmont, there's like one street that has like 5 buildings, and these are the only 5 buildings that can have a firearm business at. So it's like getting over those zoning hoops has been the hardest. And then I think most of us know like San Jose have new ordinances for gun shops. The biggest one being having like video recording every transaction. So that's something that is pretty expensive to do. Because it not only covers new gun shops, but all of the current gun shops need to comply. So I don't remember who I was talking to, but they were saying that like they were talking to someone at the San Jose Bass Pro Shop, and it was like tens of thousands of dollars just to cover the parking lot, because that's one of the requirements. So for like a smaller gun shop to like outfit everything where it's recording all the transactions and storing everything on site, and then being able to pull up those records, like it's a pretty big deal, and it is a good amount of initial investment. So it's not something that it definitely made it harder. But like the zoning was the hardest to get past.
But you've gotten past that. You have a lease now, and
yep.
Do you have a name?
Yeah, I do. I'm calling it Enclave Outfitters. So not going to use like firearms or anything in the name. Not going to be like putting the address on the website or anything. Trying to keep it as DL as possible. But yeah, just with all the licenses I need to get for the state of California, it probably won't be operational for another 6 months. So the permits have to like be sequentially done, like one after another versus done parallel. So in order for me to get my San Jose firearms resale permit, I have to first get my federal firearms license, and then after I get the San Jose one, then I can get the state level one, and then to get the state level one, I need to like take classes to do X, Y, and Z. So it's just that there's lots of steps that go into it, but they can't be done in parallel.
Yeah. Well, it sounds like a long process for sure. We'll have to have you back on at some point to talk about it once you're through the whole thing.
Sure. Yeah.
And also we'll have to have the rest of you guys back on again to talk about updates with AAPIGO and the events that you guys have here in the future. But I really appreciate you coming on this week to talk about everything that's going on with the group. You had that great event that was very successful. Seems like, how many people showed up to that?
Yeah, about 70 people showed up to it, excluding volunteers. So we had a core group of, I think like about 10 to 20 volunteers that were just there like to help out with training. But the rest were just all mostly new shooters, a couple of more experienced ones that, were kind of there to test out their gear. But overwhelming majority were first-time folks, and we're staying in contact with them all through our email marketing list and blog updates, Twitter posts, and all of that. So, yeah.
And most of them were Asian American, of course.
Yeah, I would say 75% were Asian American, and the ones that weren't were mostly staff.
And a lot of women too, as well, right?
Yeah, good chunk of women too. I think like we had at least 6 that I know of that were there throughout the whole day.
Great. Well, I'm looking forward to having you guys on again to talk about future events and to cover them over at the Reload. So thank you all once again for coming on, and we will talk to you again real soon.
Yeah, and thank you so much for having us on. It was a great opportunity. Really appreciate it.
Thanks.
Absolutely. All right, and that is it for this episode of the Weekly Reload podcast. I think we learned a lot. I thought it was the first time we had multiple guests at once, so it was quite an adventure, I think. But I think there were quite a lot of really interesting perspectives offered there from the guys at AAPIGO, and I think that we will see probably more of them moving forward. I think they're going to be doing a lot of stuff that is worth writing about, so I'll continue to cover what they're doing, as well as what a number of other organizations that try to specialize in certain demographics in the gun owning community and try to grow them. I think there's a lot of interesting things happening in that space. So we will continue to follow that for you. And until next time, I'm Stephen Gutowski, your wonderful host. Please head over to thereload.com, get your membership today. It helps support what we're trying to do here at The Reload. It helps support our journalism. The Reload is 100% reader funded. It is an independent outlet. It does not make deals with any people that we write about, no shady contracts, nothing like that. We are reliant on the readers to fund this site, to fund this reporting, and we could not do it without you. So I implore you once again to go over and buy a membership to keep us going and keep us growing and let us do more exciting things moving forward, covering the kinds of stories you will not find anywhere else. But for that, after that pitch, I will say goodbye to you. See you again next time.
I made the devil run. I gave him poison just for fun. I had one friend, now there's none. I made the devil run. I broke so many bones, but none of them were ever mine.